It felt like I had clicked the go live button, but now we are officially live. I can see the live button. Perfect.
Hello, Chevet.
Hey Ben, how's it going?
I'm
It
doing
just
really
feels like this is
well.
a weekly ritual that we are having now because
You and
we
I
have
were just
been,
hanging out with some of our closest friends on the
yes,
interwebs.
exactly. And
It is nice
this
to see
is,
you again.
yeah, and this is like pretty much our fourth consecutive week that we started these live streams. So really, really exciting, and I think like the overall feedback so far from the community has been also really great. The first, four different live streams were focused on how you can get started with using some of the trending Gen AI or trending AI tools with Couchbase and our free tier, and finally we are now will be moving towards how you can apply those similar principles for generative AI and AI with on the edge or on the mobile side. So I'm
which
super
is
excited for that.
very exciting. And as always, to all of those who are joining us now, please, you're welcome to join us in the conversation by coming into the chat with whichever service you're watching us from, whether it's LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. It doesn't matter. You're welcome to come pop into the comments, ask a question, raise a comment, just say hi, where you're coming from. We love to talk to you. And yeah, we're going to be all about the mobile today, which is not my expertise, Chevet. So we're going to be leaning into you to guide us through the intricate web of mobile
Yep.
development with generative AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And like just a fun fact, Ben, that before I joined Couchbase, the last time I had touched Android or even like mobile dev was back in 2019 when I did a bit of React Native, and that is like I wrote probably 10 lines of code. And before that, I did an Android course back in 2016. So, I mean,
You have done more than me. I think back in 2020, maybe during COVID, I decided to try and learn React Native, and I
yeah.
followed one tutorial, and then I stopped. So that was the end of it.
I mean, it's still not bad, like that's still
No.
a good, decent introduction, I would probably say. But yeah, I mean, today, of course, we are going to be focusing on Couchbase Lite, which is the mobile offering or the edge offering from Couchbase. Of course, all of you might be aware of Couchbase Server, which is our enterprise solution that you can deploy directly on your own Kubernetes cluster or on your VM. And then we have our database as a service, which is our Capella, which is of course our premier instance through which you can collaborate. And of course, we launched the free tier if you already didn't know. So definitely try out the free tier for Couchbase Capella because that is a forever free tier. You can build your projects over there and host. In fact, like when I and Laurent were there for the first stream, we were really giving a shout out for your vector search project that you built for your blogging site, where you can search your blogs with the help of vector search, which is a really amazing use case. So that's an amazing project that even I'm now looking forward to actually have in my own blog. I haven't had the opportunity yet to ever create my own blog site, but now I have a really good reason. So perhaps sometime later we
People
should have a
don't
live
really,
stream.
I think part of what we should be doing is telling people on this stream who are watching and who are watching will watch it later, the amount of things that you can do now that there's a free tier on Couchbase Capella, which is a fully managed database as a service, full text search, vector search, all your data stored, JSON documents, structured data, unstructured data, semi-structured data, all the potential that opens up for you without ever needing to even give a credit card. For your personal projects, your portfolio websites, your little hobby things you built on the side, the thing you're launching as a SaaS on the weekends you hope is going to replace your full-time job one day, all the little things that you do, you now have basically one of the most enterprise level database as a service offerings out there at all, period, available
Yeah.
for you entirely free. That's it's absolutely incredible. So my little example of just building vector search into my blog search functionality is just one small example of like all that you could build rag apps for free now at this point. You could do everything that you want to do. It's mind-blowing the potential that's there with the free tier.
Absolutely. And I mean, this kind of extends even for our Couchbase Lite, which is, of course, as I mentioned, the flagship offering for being able to run Couchbase inside of an embedded or a mobile device. Of course, one of the biggest features when it comes to Couchbase Lite is that it is a fully embeddable database. That means even if you don't have access to internet, you can still continue to use it because it exists and it stays inside of your device itself. But the biggest factor why you should actually consider using it is that there is a thing called a sync gateway, which essentially allows you to make a connection between your Capella, or it could be a Couchbase server, so remote hosted Couchbase database instance, which can sync with the documents that you have locally stored in your device. So if there is a use case where you are leveraging both the Couchbase Lite database and you want them to get synced to the main database cluster that's running in your cloud, that is completely possible with the help of Couchbase Lite. And essentially, the way that you do it inside of Capella is with the service called as app services. And during the course of today's session and the next session, which will be a lot more hands-on, you'll see that how you can actually set up a Capella app services instance, which again is available, as Ben mentioned, it's available inside of the free tier as well. So if the free tier, you're not just limited to using and building web applications or software applications that use Capella, but you can actually also build full-scale edge to cloud devices or edge to cloud applications, which can leverage that Couchbase Lite, which is again completely free to use on your device, works completely offline, and then you can sync your documents back into Capella or sync them into your local device because it's bidirectional sync. So it happens both the ways, and you can define what kind of protocol you want for the sync to actually take place. So that's like one of the major highlighting features. And of course, we are today talking about AI, and all of our streams this entire past month have been around AI. So of course, even Couchbase Lite would not be complete without AI. And the great thing is that even vector search, which we all love, and we love building our indexes inside of Capella using like frameworks like LangChain for being able to build RAG applications, or other type of novel applications that leverage the vector search, that can also be enabled inside of Couchbase Lite. So you essentially have one of the world's first completely embeddable and local vector databases access to you. So what that means is that you can build
for free.
RAG applications.
Let's just restate that again. For free.
For free. And one of the very few, I mean, there are some other like other databases, that embeddable databases that have vector search, but it's one of the first ones and one of the fewest ones that exist today. And in fact, with our free tier, we had a general availability for the Couchbase Lite vector search that's now available to everyone. So you can start using it inside of either Swift, Kotlin, and very recently we also had support for Couchbase Lite inside of React Native. So if you're a JavaScript developer, then you can use React Native. If you are Kotlin or Java developer and build mostly with Android, you can use their SDKs. Or if you are a Swift developer, you can also use that. And in fact, like of course, like our company like does not maintain Flutter, but if I'm not mistaken, there are some community organized or community hosted open source projects with, if I'm not mistaken, because I have not really worked with Flutter that much. So there might be a community plugin for Couchbase Lite with Flutter, but I'm not probably 100% sure. But yeah, that's the reason why we're conducting this particular webinar. And I know when you yourself were very excited for jumping on and getting to kind of learn together.
Because I've heard quite a lot about what people are building out in the real world using AI on the edge, basically.
Exactly.
And with Couchbase Lite and building really versatile, robust mobile applications primarily that give users a pretty seamless experience, regardless of what their connectivity is like in that moment, which is honestly, I am all about improving user experience. That's why I'm so interested in vector search, because the potential has in a hybrid search methodology to really unlock incredible user search experiences. And so the seamlessness of the connectivity for this is also equally, I think, tantalizingly fascinating. So yes, 100%.
No, I completely agree, and I think that just the capability offered by and the versatility that you have, right? Because you can now include applications that run on the edge. So we have had some examples from the community where you can run Couchbase Lite inside of a Raspberry Pi. So just imagine the kind of capabilities that unlocks for any developer, because now you're not just limited to using something like you know like a mo- like a desktop app, because you can run Couchbase inside of your server, inside of the web, inside of like building a web application, mobile application, and even embedded devices. So that's like the versatility that is offered by the entire list of places where you can actually have and host a database. So that's like one of the best things that I personally love about the, again, like talking more about the developer experience and thinking that how we can cater to different types of developer personas as well.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So let me do one thing. I'll probably just first like to give a quick introduction to everyone about Couchbase Slides. Of course, we spoke through some of it. We can probably skim through some of the things, and then we can touch more about how you can actually leverage vector search inside of Couchbase Slide. And of course, today's session is more informational, and we'll just have a couple of demos that we have prepared for everyone to kind of highlight and showcase the capability that's there on offer with respect to Couchbase vector search on the edge. And then we can probably focus on the next stream, which will be much more hands-on. That will be conducted on Thursday. So stay tuned if you are interested to dive deeper into how you can leverage Couchbase Lite, and if you want to probably develop alongside. And we'll also be sharing some resources towards the end in order for all of you to get started with Couchbase Lite. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So let's see if I'm able to get this up and running. Okay, just a minute. All right. So I think we should be able to see the screen now. So it just says it's loading.
Yep, it's
Okay,
coming in.
perfect.
There we go.
All right, perfect. So of course, sometimes you might see it getting referred to as by Couchbase Mobile, or sometimes you might see it being referred to as Couchbase Lite. So it's pretty much one of the same thing. Now, as I mentioned, that primarily the way that Couchbase Lite works is that it's a fully featured NoSQL embedded database. So it's actually based on SQLite, and it runs completely on your device. And using what we call a sync gateway, which primarily leverages WebSocket connection, you can now sync your data to Couchbase server, or in this case, Couchbase Capella. So you can basically sync your documents that are either stored right now inside of Couchbase Lite, and sync and update your document collections inside of the Couchbase Capella, or vice versa, because that allows for bi-directional sync. So sometimes, let's say you are in a situation where you don't have access to the internet, but since the Couchbase Lite embedded database can run completely offline, you update some documents, and then when you get access to the internet again, those documents will sync back into Capella, or the Couchbase server, without you having to actually do anything manually, because there are what we call as replication strategies, which allow for you to automatically sync your data. And this is completely up to the user on how they want this entire sync process to actually work. So these are pretty much like the product stack of how you can manage. So of course, you can leverage the either Capella for being able to sync with your Couchbase Lite, or you can use any of the self-managed or deployment of like self-managed, whether it's Capella or it's your Couchbase server. And as I mentioned, that it's not just limited to being able to sync your data from the cloud to the edge, or vice versa. Another really great impactful aspect of Couchbase Lite is the peer-to-peer synchronization. So what does that mean? That let's say that if you have multiple devices, multiple mobile or edge devices that are in the vicinity within each other in the same network area, all of them can basically sync with each other as well. So let's say that if you're building a polling app, now you will have, let's say, the main server or the main node, and then you have a bunch of other nodes which are connected to the same network. And within the poll, every particular device now clicks on the vote button, and all of them get synchronized at the same time by using Bluetooth, so that you are able to sync all of those particular documents. And let's say the main device will get updates from all of these individual devices because of this peer-to-peer synchronization. Now this is a great use case. For example, one of the latest customers that we are having discussions with is like a ticket management system, where if you're like, let's say, inside of a theater, or you're at a music festival and you're trying to get your music tickets locally at the venue itself, so you could use a peer-to-peer sync to get updates on how the tickets orders are actually getting created. Or another really great example could be at a restaurant. So at a restaurant, as we know, that every single table might have a device from which you can directly order, and then you'll have a centralized hub where the restaurant owners, they can see all of the orders getting placed. And again, that can be managed with the help of Couchbase Lite, where you don't need necessarily access to the internet, and all of these can happen completely offline with the help of this peer-to-peer synchronization. And of course, if the question is that, hey, is it actually secure? So yes, it does have a similar type of security as you might have with respect to the actual device itself. So I would love to know your thoughts, by the way, Ben, because I'm like, these are some really, really incredible use cases.
I think you have explained it really well, and I think you're 100% right. These use cases really demonstrate to us the versatility and the potential that this offers for so many different applications and so many different things. I was thinking about, I heard once about a use case around vending machines that manage their own inventory using Couchbase Lite. Have you heard about this one yet?
No, not yet, to be honest. I haven't.
That's pretty cool. So it's a vending machine that manages its own inventory, and the internet connection can be spotty at times, right? So when it gets connectivity again, then it syncs. It uses the sync gateway and syncs the data. But in the meantime, it almost autonomously manages its inventory, which it's just another one of the examples of so many examples of how this all kind of works together. It's really, really cool.
Absolutely. And yeah, and like, the use cases that are there are just incredible. And there are a lot of different gaming companies also that use Couchbase Mobile for, again, doing this data sync, because like, if you're in a multiplayer kind of scenario where there are multiple players playing together, you could have like a localized leaderboard which automatically gets updated after every single round. And there are a lot of companies in Korea, especially South Korea, which leverage Couchbase Lite as their main database for all of these RPG games, right? Now, I'm not that much into gaming, so I cannot probably relate to it that much. But perhaps, Ben, if you have had any experience like playing mobile games or RPG games,
I am also not so much into gaming, although
Yeah.
my kids are into gaming online mobile games. They're probably better experts than I am at this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, games are not who has time nowadays for games, Shivay? It's
I mean,
really
a lot
hard
of
to
people
find the
do.
time. I don't.
Considering
I
that,
wish I had the time.
yeah, because considering that people can make millions of dollars using like playing esports. And in fact, like,
That's true.
Couchbase is a great database, by the way, for esports, because like, whenever you talk about any of these high performance games where there are thousands of players playing at the same time, you need like high throughput, and you need like low latency, right? So that you can very easily perform your actions, and your database can actually get updated very quickly. So I think we have had some live webinars as well, talking about why Couchbase is a great choice, not just like mobile, but in general, Couchbase as a database platform. Why is it great for mobile games, or even like games in general? Because of some
Right.
of the capabilities that we have with our inbuilt caching, which is a great
Inbuilt
use case to
caching,
cover.
very good latency.
Exactly.
The requests are really quick, and all
Yeah.
the sync gateway, all the different features really kind of provide an optimal kind of development environment for building rapid games, because no one wants to wait even more than a second for a response from a game nowadays, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, like, one thing as we mentioned is that you can very easily sync. So either you have the peer-to-peer sync, which can be accomplished within all of the edge devices, or of course you can basically sync one layer above, so through your centralized cloud, or if you have some edge data centers. And the great thing is that even if you have outages inside of your centralized cloud, which, as we know, that whenever there is a outage, there is huge chaos, whether it is outage when it comes to, let's say, outage related to probably ChatGPT going down, or AWS, one of the data centers of AWS going down. We know, right, that it can be a huge impact, right? But when you have a database that's locally running in your own device, that's the great part, that even if you have these outages, you still don't have to worry, because these databases will continue to operate. So that's like why we have that kind of reason why we are investing so much into having this mobile experience. But at the same time, we don't compromise on the cloud, because of course, like, you still need cloud to do a bulk load of your work. And by the way, I saw that there is Andre. I met Andre during the APAC Partner Connect. He's also a great person. Works. He's one of the biggest champions for Couchbase. He's also doing a lot of GenAI stuff with
Well,
Couchbase.
Andre just said exactly what I think everyone would agree with. He echoed a sentiment that I think everyone watching would agree with, which is that was a fantastic explanation so far.
Yeah.
Shive, you really have a beautiful way of taking complex ideas and presenting them in ways that those of us who are not yet super familiar with the areas you're talking about can understand. So bravo from Andre, but also from all of us.
No, thank you so much. I think, like, just because I've been focusing so much on Couchbase Mobile of late, it just comes naturally when you are speaking with so many developers and just having conversations. So yeah, I mean, I do personally, I've started to love mobile development like after having joined Couchbase, so I'm extremely grateful for that. Yeah. But yes, coming back to the point that, as we know that now Couchbase Lite does support vector search, so why should one invest in that, right? So there are pretty much like four major reasons. Because you're able to run this vector search queries directly inside of your mobile device. That means you don't need to be connected to probably like an dedicated server where you're generating your embeddings and then you're actually doing your vector search query. So, for example, and then as I mentioned, that even if you don't have any connection, then you can still use it in offline mode. And of course, probably the most important aspect is the data privacy, because whenever you are using any sort of cloud service, no matter how secure that service might be, there's always going to be a chance that there could be a compromise happening, right? No system can say that they are completely secure. So especially if you are working on some highly confidential data, for example, if you are working with medical data, right, you might not want to send it to a centralized server. So at that time, you can use the vector search and still have the complete data privacy. One of the use cases that you can probably think of is, let's say that you are in a really remote area and you get like a cut, and now you're trying to probably identify what could you do regarding that, and you don't have access to internet, so you can technically use vector search and find what might be the most relevant remedy for the cut that you have gotten or some sort of injury that you've gotten. And that's like, again, an example where you can leverage the AI capabilities offered by the vector search and run it in complete offline mode as well, completely securing your data. So like that was one thing I wanted to cover. And now, of course, like today I'll also kind of show you a real world example of an application. So here is kind of like the architecture that you would basically have. So one of the applications that I built when I initially got started with the vector search was using using image embeddings. So now, of course, one thing to keep in mind is that whenever you are using any sort of vector database, you would also need a separate embedding model. So right now, at this moment, Couchbase allows the users to bring their own embedding models themselves. So we don't provide like being able to generate embeddings as a service. So we have the customizability where the users can use any type of embedding model that you might want to use, whether it's OpenAI embedding or you want to use an on-device embedding as well. So that's completely up to the developer what they wish to use. So in this example, what you're seeing is that let's say that you have a bunch of media images, so a bunch of images that you can leverage, and now you can basically pass all of these images through an embedding model. So in this case, this could be a clip model. So a clip is basically a vision transformer model from OpenAI, and that will help you to generate your vector embeddings for these images of dimensions of 512. Now you can store them inside of either Capella or in this case inside of Couchbase Lite, like you would do it similarly inside of Couchbase Capella. And then you can, of course, now bring in your new image with which you want to find the most relevant images which are closest to the ones that you want to use the vector search for. So you pass that again through the embedding model, and then you pass that vector created into the search service where now you can use the vector search. Now we have, of course, like explained how vector search basically works. It will help you to find the closest images based on their cosine similar, like based on their distance, the vector distance, which are the closest to the given image, and then it will return to you the list of the media items which are the most closely related to it, which means that their vector distance was the shortest, and this way you can like then use that for some other application purpose. So that's a great example to showcase that all of this actual search service and the embeddings that are stored are completely stored on device. Now, of course, if you are using Swift with iOS, Apple provides native APIs or native set of models that allow you to generate the embeddings also inside of Swift on Apple devices. But let's say if you are using Android, then you can use either some of the cloud-based embeddings, or if you want to have like a completely offline first experience, you can also have some of the embedding models like from Hugging Face or Onyx-based models that can actually run completely on Android devices. And I'll also quickly show you a couple of examples of how you can actually accomplish that.
I did not
Ben,
know.
if you wanted to.
I did not know that Apple provided native embedding APIs for Swift developers. That's a new piece of learning for me today. I had no
Absolutely.
idea.
Because it's called as the NLE embedding. So this is something that's, of course, and I wish that there was support for this on Android as well, because Apple, considering that they have such a closed platform, they can technically do this because they own the hardware, they own the software, right?
Of course.
So they have these specific classes which essentially you can leverage and augment with your regular with your regular vector search queries to find, like, let's say, do some kind of similarity matching. And in fact, we have some really cool demos that are available on our YouTube channel, where we also showcase how you can add items to cart by just showing an image of a particular item. So again, all of these, what they denote is the capability for users to be able to very easily build applications and not have to worry that, okay, do I need to have an external embedding model, or do I need some other type of use case? So I'll probably showcase this particular video just to kind of show, because this is actually an Android demo, an iOS demo that was created by Mark Gamble. So I hopefully this should be visible. So in this case, this is an example, really classical example, where you can see that as soon as we scan the image of any fruit item, it is able to use the vector search query and find the most related food item, and it automatically adds this to your cart. So this is an example of an e-commerce app where you can just bring in close an image of, let's say, the type of article you want to add to your bucket, and just by using the image, it is using the inbuilt embeddings from Apple to generate the embeddings. And then, of course, we use the Couchbase vector search running with Swift, Couchbase Lite vector search running inside of Swift. And you can see that it is completely offline. Like, the Wi-Fi is turned off and it is able to run automatically. So that was like a quick demo. Of course, we'll share the links for all of these. Now, of course, when it comes to Android, it is perhaps not that intuitive because there are no native methods. And that's also because of the fact that Android is a very vast platform. every
Right.
single vendor has their own, what is it called? Taste of Android, or skin on Android, I guess.
It's not a closed ecosystem, unlike
Yeah,
Apple. So
for sure.
it's really it's a diverse, heterogeneous environment of which
Exactly.
you can build with any APIs, go with any services. You can, and there's untold numbers of variations of Android out
Yeah.
there.
So, like, that was one of the reasons why when I started doing the development, it was kind of a bit tricky to kind of get started, because I was aware that yes, I have to use vector search, but then when it came to like using, okay, what type of model should I use? If I want to build a RAG application, should I use an on-device large language model, or should I use a cloud-based large language model? Because there are so many uncertainties when it comes to like Android specifically. And of course, like, I have been focusing more on the Android side of the spectrum. But yeah, like, that's the typical way in which you would start building your application.
Right.
But yes, yeah, sorry, Ben, you would say.
No, I was just saying correct. I agree. I was giving you an affirming statement, Chavez. I'm excited. Let's keep
Yeah.
going.
Sure. So I think now it's a good segue for us to kind of get started. So the first thing that I'll also like just probably touch upon is, if you of course want to get started with Couchbase Lite, you can of course use the different SDKs. So we have availability for running Couchbase Lite inside of Android, and for that you can refer to our Kotlin SDK, or even like you can build it with Java. And then of course we have primarily the capability to run Couchbase Lite inside of C. So this will be something where if you are using some sort of an embedded device like Raspberry Pi, which you interface with C, so you can also build Couchbase Lite applications running on top of embedded devices as well. Or if you want to run it on React native, then you have the JavaScript and Swift for building Couchbase Lite applications on iOS or Mac OS applications. So that's the typical way to get started. Now, of course, if you are getting started with Android specifically, there are a few things that you need to keep in mind when you are implementing this from scratch in your application. Now, we're just going kind of giving you a high level idea of how to actually get started. So that's the first thing that we'll first discuss, and then I think we can in the next session we'll have a much more hands-on session where we will build an entire application from scratch. So in order to of course like get started, there are a few dependencies that you'll have to add to your Kotlin project. So these will
Chavez,
be added.
we got a quick question for you from
Yeah,
Deshaun. What
sure.
about Couchbase on Raspberry Pi? Can we do the same principle with using a Raspberry Pi?
Absolutely. So I think I probably mentioned this, that you can use Couchbase Lite on top of Raspberry Pi as well. So as long as it probably supports a C, like embedded C, then you can run the Couchbase Lite on Raspberry Pi or any other embedded device which supports a SQLite database. So if the platform has native support for being able to run that, then yes, it can completely run. And in fact, like if I'm not mistaken, there should be a GitHub repository, and in fact, like there is this blog
Want me to
post
search for it?
that's yeah. So I can quickly share it. So
Oh,
I'll
you
just
have it
post it over
already.
here.
Look at you're so fast.
Yeah. So this is like the main blog post that is there. So it's actually this is from the forum. It was not from the blog, but I think like I had seen like one of the GitHub repositories very recently where a person actually used like embedded C. I might have to search for it, but yes, trust me, like yes, it is possible. So if you ask like, is it possible? So yes, it is possible for sure to run Couchbase Lite inside of a Raspberry Pi.
I'm taking a look
And yes, that
myself.
will help you
If
to
I
save
happen
your
to find it,
costs.
I'll post in the comments too while we
Yeah,
keep
sure.
on going.
Yeah, absolutely. So of course, like to get started, you would install all of these different dependencies, and then what you would do is once you have installed these particular dependencies, of course, whenever you start off an Android project, you have to do a Gradle build. So it will install all of these different dependencies for you, And then, of course, you can choose between either using an enterprise edition or a community edition of Couchbase Lite. So, of course, like if you're building some projects locally just for your fun purpose or for learning purpose, then you can basically install the community edition. That's what we will recommend. And this involves you to have to add Couchbase Lite to your dependencies section and also enter it in under the Maven Central. And then, of course, if you are building your Couchbase Lite app on Kotlin with the help of vector search, so there is a separate dependency that you have to install specifically for the vector search. So in that case, as you can see that you have two main dependencies. One is for the core Couchbase Lite itself, and then the other one is for the Couchbase Lite Android vector search. So these are the two main dependencies that you will have to consider when you are trying to get your or trying to actually enable your Couchbase vector search. So that's the kind of the primary way in which you initialize or at least set up your entire Android project whenever it comes to leveraging Couchbase Lite. But I think if there are no other questions, Ben, or probably if you had any questions, it will be a good segue for us to now go into the actual code.
I think we're good in the questions, and I am ready to see some code. I'm
Absolutely.
itching for some code, Chave. Let's get in there.
For sure. So let me stop sharing my screen and let me quickly jump into my Android Studio. Now, keep in mind that Android Studio can be a bit bulky. So do keep in mind that if you are trying out, you do have enough RAM in your system if you are building with.
That's not a qualitative comment on Android in general. We love all Android users.
Yeah,
It's just perhaps Android Studio is a little bulky.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely a bit of a bulky because it basically ships with an entire emulator. So
Right.
as you might imagine that it's it definitely does take some amount of resources, but
But if
like
you use the resources, it's probably a nice dev experience.
yeah, exactly. And then of course, like if you're building with Android, you can either choose to use an emulator, or if you have an actual Android device, you can connect your Android device to that particular emulator, and then the APK gets generated instead of Android Studio, and then you can basically launch that APK inside of your mobile device. So if
Nice.
you don't have enough RAM, perhaps to run an entire emulator, then you can always have the
Just
fallback
use
option
your
of
on-hand Android
yeah.
at your desk, basically.
All right, so let me stop my screen and present my entire screen. All right, so let me know if this is good to go.
Well, we're getting the mirror of eternities.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so the first thing that I'd like to do is I would like to kind of give you an overview of the actual app, and then I'll also quickly show you a quick demo of how the actual app functions, right? So normally, like, of course, if we were to do a comparative study between like initializing Couchbase inside of a Node.js application, or and for that matter, like what I can do is I can also go ahead and launch a cursor where I can open up, like an actual app. So, for example, if I quickly open up one of the apps, let's actually go ahead and do that. So this was the actual app that we built for our live stream in the last 4 live streams. So if you haven't watched that, I'll definitely recommend all of you to watch that particular stream, because we used tools like V0 and we built a chat with PDF generative AI application using Couchbase Lite. So now if you compare like the typical way in which you would initialize, so of course in this case my code will be inside of the lib folder, where you'll see that in this case I'm using the Node.js SDK, and I define my connection string, the username and password for my Capella cluster, or for that matter it could be a Couchbase server cluster, and then I use the connect method to actually go ahead and connect to my database cluster. Of course, for that you would require for your Couchbase database cluster to be running inside of Capella. So if it's not turned on, of course, this method would not work. So do ensure that your actual cluster is active inside of the Capella in the cloud instance, and that's the regular way in which you initialize and then connect to the cluster. Sorry, I think Ben, you were saying something.
I was saying you could check that it's active in multiple different ways. You could use the CLI, you could
Oh
go into
yeah,
the
that's true.
UI, you could use an IDE extension. There's so many different ways you
Yeah.
could check the state of your Capella cluster.
For sure, for sure. I completely missed that. I was just kind of comparing between the SDK to SDK, like how you do it with the
Right, of
comparison. Like
course.
if
But
you're,
meaning if
yeah,
you don't have to jump out of your coding environment
exactly.
to check
You
if
don't
it's
have to.
active or not, which
Yeah,
I don't know about you, that is one of the more annoying things I'm in the midst of working. Like, oh, now I have to open a browser and go check if something
yeah,
is whatever. So you don't need to
Mhm.
do that. There's multiple options.
Exactly. So in this case, now what you'll see is that I'll probably first go to our settings.gradle.kds file, because this is where you'll see that we have imported Couchbase. So this is our Maven repository for Couchbase. And then, of course, as we kind of showcase that we need the dependencies that we would use. So in this case, the implementation are defined over here. So we need the library for Couchbase Lite and the vector search, because we are using both the Couchbase Lite and the Couchbase Lite vector search inside of our application. So as we covered in the beginning, that when you are setting up a new Android Studio project or a new Kotlin project for your Android app, that's where you have to add those dependencies, and then you have to build your app. So it will probably take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes if you're creating a new application for the first time and you're importing Couchbase Lite dependency. So it will take around 5 to 10 minutes to build. Now, of course, the way that you actually initialize a database, because here, of course, you'll not have a method to connect to a database because you're connecting to a remote cluster, to a remote Couchbase cluster. But in this case, you're actually running the database itself on your device. So you'll see this method where we do Couchbase Lite.init. So we initialize a new database with the given context, and this is how you are able to start to use that particular Couchbase Lite database. Now we have what you'll see a separate function where we have actually gone ahead and called this particular database that we just initialized. So this will be used to make that particular Couchbase Lite database active. And very similar to how you define your scopes and collections, considering that of course this is still a document object stored database. So we can define our different collections. So in this example app, I have defined various collections such as the question, score, and then question, scores, and I think there is the yeah, and the image category collection. So we have like these three different type of collections, and we have actually defined the data model for each of them. So for example, if you talk about what's the structure of the questions database, like what will be the kind of data that will be stored inside of it. So we have defined the data model or the data class for the questions. So it will have all of these different key values over here. So for example, it will have the ID, it will have question. So pretty similar to how you would define your data classes inside of your main Capella, when you're defining your scopes and collections. It works in a very similar manner. And that's
Right.
the reason why you're able to use your sync gateway to sync your data from your Couchbase Lite back to Capella, because it follows a very similar structure.
That sounds great. And that data modeling looks similar to what you might do with like one of our ODMs, like Ottoman
Exactly.
JS or
Yeah,
the new Ruby ODM or what have you.
exactly. And to give you kind of more context, so for example, this questions collection is just a regular data object where you are storing certain questions. So by the way, like just for context, this is like a quiz app where you can upload an image of any monument or food item, or perhaps like a flower, and then based on the image that you upload, it will automatically go ahead and use the vector search to find, okay, based on the image that you have just uploaded, what is the category of the image that you have uploaded, like similar to that iOS demo that we showed, when you uploaded like an image, or when you brought or you clicked an image of like let's say a pineapple. So it was able to detect that, yeah, this is the closest
Now, of
image.
course, there might be ambiguous situations where the food is also the monument, where it may be the
Yes.
world's largest pineapple, and
Yeah,
that's the monument, but it's also a food. Those ambiguous moments, who knows what may happen in those
yeah.
situations.
And That's a very valid point, Ben, and that's where you have to be very careful when you are using an embedding model. See, because a Couchbase Lite itself, like if we just talk about like on Android, it does not have the intelligence that it actually looks at the product and it knows, or it actually looks at the image and it is able, like it's not using an LLM. It's simply using vector search, which is matching what are the closest matching features given for a given data. So it's always advisable that you use an embedding model that has enough embeddings, because Couchbase, as we have mentioned in previous sessions as well, that it can support embeddings up to 2048 dimensions in size.
Right.
So, like one of the mistakes that I did earlier when I was just starting off my journey into kind of using Couchbase Lite, and that was like the first time I was also actually doing vector search. So, in fact, like that is also documented in this particular code. So, as we'll dive deeper, I'll show you that I was using an embedding size of 3 because
Mhm.
I was not able to find a really good embedding model for images. So, I ended up using a very basic model called as AlexNet, which is one of
Right.
the most basic machine learning models. It has
And
been
of
trained
course, when we
over,
talk about dimensionality, it's important
yeah.
to mention, at least for a moment, what it is that we're talking about. What does it
Mhm.
mean on in 1 foot, just standing on 1 foot very briefly? What does it mean to say something has only 3 dimensions, or 2048 dimensions, or 4000 dimensions? What is the
Mhm.
actual distinction
Yeah,
between those things? For those of us out there who are not data scientists, if we just
yeah,
want to give a brief 1 sentence explanation, what would you say to that, Shafe?
yeah. So an embedding is a numerical array. It can have one element or it can have n number of uh, numbers,
Of
right? It can have
elements.
n values. And what these values denote are the real world features of anything. It could be like,
Exactly.
let's say, RGB values. Even that can be
Right.
considered an embedding because it's RGB, 3 values. Or it could be, as I mentioned, an OpenAI clip model that generates an embedding of 512 embeddings, or the size of the embeddings is 512. That means that whatever input data that you give to it, it gets converted into that mathematical array with 512 values. That array has 512 values, and that is what denotes your real world features of that data.
Right.
So the more amount of embeddings that you have, the more descriptive your data is being described
The
by
more
that
amount of
numerical array.
the more amount of dimensions you have, the more
Exactly.
descriptive. Right.
Yeah.
And but the more dimensions, of course, is also the more space. And
Yes. That
so
will require more
part of
space.
the give and take is
Yes.
descriptiveness versus space constraints. And how do
Hmm.
we manage it? How do we maintain just enough dimensionality to get accurate results, but not
Yeah.
too much dimensionality that we end up utilizing all of our space?
Exactly. And like of course, one of the drawbacks would also be that if you have too large of an embedding, then it can be also a bit slow to query through it as
Right.
compared to
That's
like
also
something
true.
that has, yeah,
And that
exactly.
there's the third conundrum or the third dilemma in our trilemma, which is also speed. So space,
Speed as well.
accuracy, and speed.
For sure. Exactly. That's correct.
Awesome. Okay,
But yeah,
let's keep going.
yes, absolutely. So coming back to the actual database itself. So as I mentioned, that you would define your collections like you would define inside of a typical Couchbase application that you're building. So in this case, I have defined all of these different collections. And now what I've gone ahead and done is I have actually now started to create these collections. So of course, like I've just defined some methods because this is where I'm just initializing the database. So I'm setting up the database for the first time. I'm creating the relevant collections that need to exist inside of our database. And once I've actually gone ahead and done that, what I do is I go ahead and actually import the data from my JSON file. Now, of course, there could be different strategies for importing the data. What I like to do is that before I initialize the app, I would have some amount of data already existing inside of my application. So in this case, like in this particular application, what I'm doing is I'm importing all of the image embeddings. So basically, these are getting pre-rendered because I'm not like opening the app and then generating the embeddings for, like, let's say an image data set of 2,000 images. I've already done that for myself. Of course, you could do it inside of the app. I'm just doing that by I'm just doing that beforehand.
Right.
That's completely a business decision that you'll have to use. But either way, like generally the way that you'll interact with is you would basically just go ahead and call that particular collection in which you want to insert your documents, and then you would just go ahead and keep on adding those particular JSON documents. So for example, if you want to import your list of questions, so you can see that we are running an array that goes through the entire JSON array length, and based on how many questions that are there, it automatically adds them to our questions collection inside of our database. And similarly, I do it for our questions, for our images, and that's like the where you have now gone ahead and actually initialized the database. Now, if you were to compare between the vector search versus Capella, or using it with your typical Couchbase cluster, so that's like another important thing to keep in mind. So of course, in this case, you don't need to create an external vector index, which you typically need to do inside of the full text service when you're using Couchbase Capella or the server. The actual index that you create is also done completely on device. So this is where you'll see that I can go specifically to our section of our code where I actually do that initialization for vector. So I'll just quickly go over there. So this is where you'll see that we have defined our config for the actual vector. So you know how you'll have like a vector index where you define, like, it's an entire JSON file where you define that what is that particular collection based out of a particular scope, which will be used for and then you define your dimensions, the number of centroids. So that's an entire process, and we have like enough documentation. We'll share that with you. So in this case, what we do inside of Couchbase Lite is that we have this method called as the vector index configuration, where the first thing that you pass is um, the actual field which will be used. In this case, we have the image vector 12. So this is basically one of the fields from our image collection. So if you take a look at our image embedding.json file, this has the name, the unique ID, and then it has this particular image vector. Of course, in this case, it's a 3-dimensional vector. So we have defined this as, so this will be the field, similar to how we define what field you want for to generate the actual embedding. So going back into our database manager class, so we define what is that particular field that will be used for the embedding. Then you define the total dimension size. So in this case, as I mentioned, that this is an example where I'm using the AlexNet model. So in this case, the dimension of the vector would be 3, and then the centroid. So of course, like the centroids, will not probably dive too deep into the actual working of this, but you basically can think that when you actually do the vector search, right? In order to reduce the amount of search space, you have these centroids that kind of overlap the entire vector dimension search space, and they help you to reduce the amount of relevant documents based on which you will actually do the search against. So, like, let's say you have 1 million documents. Now, if you try to do the vector search and against all of these 1 million documents, it will take a lot
You
of
may
time.
see a spinning wheel for a while searching.
Yeah, exactly. So centroid is a way to like just configure how many centroids you want, and basically that provides you like an overlapping experience, so that reduces the amount of search space. Again, for more information on what are these centroids as an application developer, we have the blog post. Probably, Ben, if you have some time, you can share, or you can just go to our blog site and search for vector search, and you'll find some deep engineering blog post. And we'll make sure
Quite
to
a
also
lot of
share it.
resources, actually. If you search our
Yeah.
Couchbase blog, which is couchbase.com/blog, I'll share a link
Exactly.
right here. You'll find quite a lot of content on vector search with really good, deep technical detail.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's where now what we'll do is that we are also now creating the actual index over here. So this was just the config. And that is where we now create the index by providing an index name. So we define the index name over here. In this case, we'll call it the image index. And then what we do is that once we have passed that and the config, we finally go ahead and actually create our vector index. Now, the question would be, how do I actually use it? So that is where I will use it inside of this function. So in this case, I have a function named as search, which will be used to search the documents. And you'll see again, the great thing about vector databases with Couchbase is that you'll still use your SQL-like query. So the SQL plus query. So in this case, this is our query, in which you'll see that we are basically fetching the ID, the name, the image vector, and the category to which that particular image vector belongs to, in which we'll do a vector match where we are going to match our given input vector. So if you go back to that particular slide over here, where we pass now a new image, we generate the embeddings for that. So we generate the vector for that. So that's this particular vector, and we compare it, or we do the vector matching against our index that we created. So the vector index. So and then we say that how many number of nearest neighbors do we want, and this SQL query will fetch all of those nearest neighbors, and that's where we'll now start to actually use that query. So we will pass our vector parameters inside of our query, and then we will go ahead and find, we'll execute that particular search, and we will find the list of the nearest vectors, and we will pass them inside of an image.
And this is all happening, just to reiterate, on device.
On device, yes.
So, how brilliant is that? That's amazing. Exactly.
And just in a few lines of code. So
I mean, that's absolutely astounding. That's amazing.
Yeah. Now, probably, because you have also done this now a few times, Ben, that your entire JSON file inside of Capella, it's probably like 20, 30, 50 lines of JSON. But in this case, it was just 3 lines of config. And then the actual query where we defined how the vector match would work. Now, of course, there are multiple methods with which you can do. There is also the approx vector match or approx match. There are different types of vector search that you can implement. This is like one example. So configurations related to the vector search again can be found on the documentation for the vector search on Couchbase Lite, which again we'll make sure to share that inside of the documentation. But yeah, that's another example of how you can leverage the actual vector search directly inside of the Couchbase Lite. So again, quickly showing how the developer experience, in order to make it very easy for anyone to actually develop applications, again shows you how that works.
That's awesome.
So that's a classic example. Exactly.
That is a really good example. Yeah. It's amazing how little code that we actually need to have to execute what we need to execute. It's brilliant.
And I know that we are running out of time, so I just have a quick demo for everyone. So I'll just quickly bring this up. So in fact, this was shown at one of the so I'll probably quickly skip this. But yeah, so the idea is that here, I'm just quickly showing the demo. So here you can see that I'll try to just go ahead and run this demo for better functionality. So you'll see that over here, I'm using the same app that's running. So I enter my name, I go ahead and now click on upload an image. So I select an image of something. In this case, I had a different data set, but in this case, I select an image, and then I'll see what is the category that it actually belongs to. So as soon as I select an image, it runs the actual vector search query, which you can see that I've also highlighted in this particular example. So for example, if I select, let's say, a shape, so this is circle. So now what you'll see is that I'm also considering, I'm basically generating the log. So for example, here you can see that I had an image of a triangle, and it gave me the list of, it basically returned the 3 closest vectors that it matched, and then the category of the actual data which it detected, or it basically categorized based on the 3 nearest vectors that it got. So it correctly determined that, yes, this is an example of a shape. So of course, this was a different data set that when I had presented this particular talk. I had modified the data with, images of, so if you can see that inside of my image embedding.json, where I have images of monuments, then I have food and flowers. So of course, you can build your own data set and implement something like this. as an example. But yes, as soon as you select that image, it generates the embeddings and it does the vector search and returns you the three nearest vectors, and then you can do anything that you want with that data.
That is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Absolutely. Uh, and I know that we are slightly over time, but this was like a comprehensive overview of what you can do with vector search
Well,
on the edge.
Cheve, you took us from zero to hero when it comes to understanding
Understanding.
Couchbase Lite, vector search on the edge, how to actually run it, what it looks like, what the architectural flow is. I can't believe you accomplished everything we did in 1 hour and 32, 33, 34 seconds. That's
Yes.
absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm shocked. Uh, I feel like I personally have learned so much during this hour with you, and I'm
Yeah.
grateful for that. And I know that all of our viewers also probably share that same sentiment. I know several of them have already expressed that as well in the comments. And
Mhm.
for those who could join late or feel they got caught up in tickets on Jira and they weren't able to watch as much or what have you, this is going to go on our recording, so you can follow along there as well and watch as it's archived. Cheve, thank you so much for taking us on not only this week, but on multiple weeks of journeys through vector
Yes.
search, through AI, through RAG, through Gen AI, through all of it, all the way down to today.
And again, be like stay tuned, because next, the upcoming Thursday, we will have a much more hands-on session where we'll build everything from scratch. Because I thought, like, it will be good glimpse into making people understand that how does the vector search actually work. And then next on Thursday, we can directly jump into doing some Kotlin coding.
Brilliant. Amazing. Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Come back again on Thursday for a more hands-on interactive demo workshop. And until then, everyone have a wonderful day, morning, afternoon, and evening, depending
Yes,
on where you are coming in from. Bye,
absolutely.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.